بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما.
So we want to begin to say a few words about the heart, and then after that we'll talk about speech. And when we look at ourselves as human beings, one of the things that stands out about us is that we must be taught almost everything that we know. Running comes natural for us. We are walkers. We can also run. But in order to run properly, we have to be taught. And most of us, if we just run on our own, we move in ways that slow us down or make us inefficient. So therefore, if we want to be good runners, we have to have someone and tell us how to run, how to put our weight, how to use our hands. And you can think of hundreds of other examples of things like that. In fact, standing is one of the most natural things we do, and yet most people don't stand properly. They stand in ways that are bad for their posture, and they stand often in ways that cut off their circulation. So to stand naturally, which is to bend your knees slightly so that you get a good center of gravity and so that you get good circulation, this is not something that most of us know naturally. We have to be taught it. How you swim. Swimming we can learn quite easily, but most of us, if we learn how to swim, we swim in ways that slow us down. Maybe they even lead to drowning. So to learn how to swim properly, you have to get instruction. You have to be made aware of how you move and what are the efficient movements, what are the inefficient movements. That's the way we are as human beings. We are cultural beings. We are cultural animals. So everything that we do, we have to be taught. And when we are taught, then usually we can learn to do those things much better. So this is also true when it comes to the heart. When we talk about the heart in Arabic or in English or probably in any language, we say that this is a person who has a heart, or this person speaks from the heart. Most of us would regard that to be metaphorical. In other words, it's not really this muscular heart in the chest that we're talking about, but it's something that somehow in our minds is associated with the heart. That's usually the way that we think in English, probably in Arabic as well, and in other languages. In the Islamic tradition, and this is something that Imam Al-Ghazali makes very clear, talking about a fundamental spiritual reality in the realm of the unseen that pertains to your identity and is in some way connected to the muscular heart. So this is part of our worldview, that things that are outward, like the muscular heart, they may be, or they often are, related to realities that are unseen and that are spiritual. So we are people, like most all traditional people, if not all traditional people, who believe in the realm of the unseen and who believe that the realm of the unseen is what makes sense of the world of the seen. Okay, so when we talk about the heart, then we're talking about something central to the human identity, which, as Imam Al-Ghazali explains, is connected to the muscular heart. And the muscular heart is a wondrous thing. We know how much blood it pumps, we know how efficient it is. Also, the muscular heart has in it neurons, and these neurons communicate to the brain, and the brain also communicates to the heart. But we believe that connected to this muscular heart, there is something else which we could call the primal heart, or that we can call the spiritual heart, which is the essence of the human being. So that's what Imam Al-Ghazali is going to talk about, and we won't talk about that much in these days because we want to focus on speech and silence. These are aspects of our behavior that are profoundly influential on the heart. The heart of hearts, the primal heart, the spiritual you, it is very much affected by what you look at, by what you listen to, by what you do or don't do, and then also by the things you say, or the things that you decide not to say because it wouldn't be proper or it wouldn't be right. Okay, so that's what we want to focus on. But in any case, we begin by reminding ourselves of some of the things that are significant about the heart itself. And again, as we do that, we want to keep in mind the fact that as human beings, we need to be taught. And then once we're taught, we can learn to observe, and we can learn to perfect. Again, to go back to the example of the runner, that once you're coached in running, and that might be over a long time, then you know what to look for. And you know whether you're running well or you're not running well. And also you can judge other runners. You're able to observe, and you're able to participate consciously in that. So this is also true about the heart and all the things that relate to the heart. When we know the reality of the heart, then we can observe it. Then we can pay attention to it. We can perfect it. We can purify it. And in doing that, also, we perfect ourselves. To know yourself, which is one of the supreme goals of human beings in all traditional societies, is to know your heart. And to understand and to be able to observe and to participate in the inner workings of the self. To be able to see, what am I doing? What am I thinking? How am I doing that? Am I really sincere in that or not? These are things that we're all, as believers and ethical human beings, concerned about. But in fact, in our spiritual development, we can become conscious of these things. And this is an essential element of self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is one of the greatest wonders of the human being, that we're able to be aware of ourselves. We're able to be critical of ourselves. We're able to evaluate ourselves. And one of the characteristics of people who are not properly developed, and often who are not ethical or even concerned about being moral, is that often they have no self-consciousness at all. They may be very aware of other people. They may be very sensitive, even super sensitive, to the faults of other people, maybe to the good qualities of other people, but they're not aware of themselves. So this ability to be able to look into yourself and to be honest with yourself. This is one of the greatest gifts of all, but also it's one of the greatest miracles of all. To be truly you, to be yourself, means to have access to your heart, to pay attention to your heart, and to be able to silence your heart when it has insinuations or it has preoccupations or it's thinking about other people. And then you can tell it actually be silent, and it will be silent. And when your heart becomes your concern, like you are interested in this topic, then that means that you are alive, and also that your heart is well. And inshallah, your heart will get better and better. Most human beings are not self-conscious. Most human beings never are aware of themselves. They're not aware of why they do the things they do. In fact, many people, as we know in our own lives, their lives are filled with contradictions. And this is also because of the lack of self-consciousness. So, most people, their hearts are unobserved. Their hearts are untrained. And just like the person who doesn't pay attention to the way they eat, or the way they drink, or the way they sit, or the way they walk, then many of the things they do may actually ultimately be harmful. In any case, they are less than perfect. They're less than the way they ought to be. Most people have dysfunctional hearts because of the fact that they're not aware of them. They don't pay any attention to what's going on in them. You could say they take their hearts for granted. They never question themselves. They regard themselves to be the most sincere of all entities with regard to themselves, whereas in fact it's not that way at all. Yani hadithul nafsi akdhabul hadith. Right? The speech of myself to myself is the biggest lie of all. That's why I have to be very careful about bad opinion or about intuitions about other people, because usually I'm wrong when I do that. Most people have sick hearts and even dead hearts. And when we look at the world around us, we're seeing the manifestations of the hearts. If we look at something beautiful, such as a beautiful village or harmonious city, that tells us about the hearts of the people in that city or in that landscape. If we see a horrendous situation, then also that tells us about the hearts of the people in us. As one of our sisters was saying a few days ago, that the things we see in this group that calls itself the Islamic State, these are sicknesses in the heart that have become manifest. They've come out. So everything we see around us in society is a reflection of the hearts of the people in that society, whether they are sick or weak or dead or alive or beautiful or whatever they may be. Most people live their lives then unconscious of the inner workings of themselves, which is the most important part of them. Allah does not look to our outward forms, but He looks to the hearts. So are these hearts pure? Are these hearts sincere? Are these hearts truthful? But most of us don't ever look there. And of course, even though we may say we want to be sincere, and even though we devote ourselves to important actions, even prayer and fasting, if the heart's not right, then that's not going to be right either. The Prophet taught us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if people like us as believers were to give gold in sadaqah to the weight of Mount Uhud to the north of Medina, which is a big mountain, as many of you know, you've seen it, it's a beautiful mountain north of the city of Medina. That gold, which would be, by the way, more than all the gold in the world that we know of, all the gold in the world that we know of would fill about 3 Olympic swimming pools. So Uhud is much bigger than that. That gold would not be worth a single date that one of his companions, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, gave a sadaqah. And why? Because of the difference of the hearts. Because their hearts were pure. And one of the things that Imam Al-Ghazali emphasizes, but that is lost on many Muslims today, is that the primary knowledge that the Salaf had, the companions, the successors of the successors, was not ilm al-fatwa. It was not the knowledge of giving legal judgments to people or a fiqh, but it was the knowledge of the heart. That they all had. That they were all fundamentally concerned with. They were people who understood the importance of the heart, and they could help you on that. Most of them, as Imam Al-Ghazali points out, they would avoid giving fatwas, because that's a huge responsibility. Not because they couldn't do it, but as long as somebody else would do it, they preferred that that person take the responsibility. But when it came to the heart, this was the fiqh, the profound understanding that they all had. So we must learn to observe our hearts. And that you can do, just as you can learn how to run, and you can learn how to swim, and you can learn how to do many things. So we have to learn to pay attention to the heart. We must wake up and take account of the dynamic part in the drama of the heart that we play, that this drama that goes on within us, in our hearts. You know, we've got to take active part in that. We need to understand that. All our words and deeds are workings of the heart. And this is why we want to talk about speech, because of the fact that silence and speech are such a big part of what happens to the heart. So all of these things are very important. And so now I think we'll just go to the topic of speech. This is what we want to talk about for the next 10 days. And here, again, one of the things that Imam Al-Ghazali, one of the most important things that he emphasizes is just as you should be conscious of the heart and all of the things that pertain to the heart, so also it's extremely important to pay attention to what we say. And again, this is something that we have to awaken to. This is something that we have to be trained in, because of the fact that for almost all of us, if not all of us, speech is the most natural thing of all. You know, we learn how to speak when we're children, and we speak all the time, and our abilities, spiritual development, and our spiritual advancement. If you are in a court of law, let's say as a defendant, even if you were a plaintiff, but let's say that we're defendants in a court of law, then we will be very careful about every word we say. And this is the way that we should always be. Think before you speak. The sign of the believer is that he or she puts their tongue behind their heart. So we think about what we will say, and then we say it. And this is the sign of the most intelligent and the wisest of all men and women. They're people who think before they speak. And what we say should be true. What we say should either be truth, or it should be something that we are sure about. We have tathabbut. It may not be true, but we believe it to be true on the basis of sound evidence. Okay, so if it's not like that, we shouldn't speak. This is again the work of the heart. Is what I am about to say true or not? Is it something that I am confident is correct, or that I'm doubtful about? And then, will this thing that I say hurt you? Because words that harm people and hurt people, they're not worth speaking, even if those words are true. It might be, for example, that a person is making big mistakes, or is doing things that are very impolite. Maybe they haven't been trained. Maybe they come from another culture. And yet, if you were to correct that person, you would harm them, you would hurt them, and they wouldn't listen. So in a case like that, it's best not to speak. We don't want to speak harmful words. We want to speak words that are beneficial. So that's the third consideration. Are the words beneficial? Will they actually help you? So if that's the case, the words are truthful, the words are not harmful, and the words can be expected to be beneficial, then speak fluently, very eloquently. Egyptians are like that, right? They're probably the best speakers in the world. They can speak and speak and speak, and they're very eloquent. But it's very important for our own well-being to be conscious of what we're saying. And the more that we make that a habit, the more natural it becomes. So we should think of ourselves always as being on trial, because ultimately the results of what we say on our tongues, this will be the critical thing that determines whether we succeed or whether we fail. Has got to weigh his or her words very carefully. What will be the consequences of this? How do I say this particular thing in a way that will be acceptable and beneficial, or that will clarify our position? So we can imagine ourselves, inshallah, as that rare commodity, which is the honest diplomat, right? So you are an honest diplomat of the truth, and therefore we have to weigh our words. We have to think about our words. And once we begin to train ourselves to do that, then we speak very carefully. And you see how people that are politically astute and people that are diplomatically astute, lawyers, and some of you are lawyers, they are so careful in considering and reconsidering the language that they use that they come to the point where everything they say is extremely carefully said. And they're always thinking of the consequences. What will result from these words? What will be understood? What will be misunderstood? Imam Al-Ghazali tells us in the Ihya, and here what we're talking about in the nights to come is taken from book 24, which is the beginning, it's at the beginning part of volume 3. Ihya Ulum-ud-Din is 4 volumes. It's one of the greatest works in human history, one of the great works of renewal and revival. Again, fundamentally concerned from beginning to the end with the heart, getting the heart right, getting Muslims to be sincere, and to try to live like the Salaf in the truthfulness of the Salaf, the goodness of the Salaf, the kindness of the Salaf. So Imam Al-Ghazali reminds us at the beginning of chapter 24 of the unique greatness of speech, the miraculous quality of speech. Speech is what we call a lordly attribute. Sifatun Rabbaniyah. Right? What are the lordly attributes? God, glorified be He, has life, and you have life. God has infinite knowledge, and you don't have that. And you don't have necessary life either, but you do have something called knowledge. God has speech, and will, and power, and hearing and seeing. And you have attributes which have those names. Yours are, of course, created attributes. Yours are very limited attributes. And they're not analogous to those attributes in God, which are necessary and uncreated and unlike anything. But nevertheless, you are who you are. You are the son or the daughter of Adam, who is central to the way that this world works and how it turns because of these lordly attributes. And of these lordly attributes, one of the most important of all is speech. And as we know from our theology, knowledge and speech are very closely related. And we say that the difference between knowledge is that knowledge manifests to the knower what is known. It reveals to you inwardly what you know. And speech points to that thing which is manifest. So if in your heart you have knowledge of some beautiful art, for example, then that is manifest in your heart. Okay, and you can think about it, and you can recall it, and you can develop it. But speech allows you to show me what you see there. So speech has the quality of demonstrating. It has the quality of pointing to that which is revealed in knowledge. And it is a profound lordly quality. God gave us bayan, as the Quran says. Bayan, articulate speech. The ability to articulate. The ability to say things succinctly and clearly. And Imam Al-Ghazali said, Allah gave you this unique gift of articulate speech, bayan, so that you could delve into the treasure chest of your heart. Because your heart is filled with knowledge. Your heart, again, is a treasure chest. And speech is what for ourselves and also for others. Because speech enables you to show that to you. Often we don't understand things until we speak about them. And those of you who have experienced writing, and I assume that all of you have that, but some of you are probably also writers, you know that it's only in the act of writing that you really come to understand the thing that you're writing about. Because those words that you use, that articulate speech, the more articulate and exact it becomes, then the better that you understand that. So our tongues, then, which are the means by which we speak, they are the great mediators between ourselves and all the infinite knowledge, wisdom, and other supreme gifts of the human heart and the human intellect and all of that which is revealed to us through the revelation of the messengers and the prophets. The tongue is what enables us to get there. The language of the Quran, understanding that language, perfecting that language, is what opens up the treasure chest of this infinite knowledge. All human faculties, and in fact, all human passions are essentially good. This is something that Imam Al-Ghazali talks about, and we won't go into depth on it, but it's important to understand. God made you good, and everything in you is potentially good. We have, for example, the passion of anger. And of course, anger can ruin our lives and the lives of other people. But is anger in itself evil? No, not at all. If you don't have the passion of anger, you will not be a complete human being. You won't be the most perfect of women, and you won't be the most perfect of men. But anger has to be disciplined. Just as we have to learn how to run if we want to run, or we have to learn how to swim if we want to swim. We have to learn also how to live with our anger and how to use forbearance. And when we do that, then anger produces incredible aspects of good character, especially courage. And courage is one of the most noble of all human virtues. But courage is based in what? The gift of anger. But the courageous man or the courageous woman is the one who knows how to control his or her anger, how to turn it off and carefully turn it on. And then there are many other virtues that come out of anger. And we think about passions of eating and drinking and sleeping and wearing clothes and all these things that human beings have. We have appetites. We have shahawat. Are these shahawat bad? No, they are good. Everything in you was created good. Allah is a merciful creator. He's Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. But again, when we learn to train these appetites, just as we learn how to run properly or walk properly, then these shahawat turn into high virtues. And usually the one that Imam Al-Ghazali mentions first is iffa, temperance, the ability to control our desire and to use it properly. So all the faculties and all the passions of human beings are essentially good, even anger, which is counterintuitive. Most of us think that anger is a bad thing. We talk about anger management, but really anger needs to be transformed into courage and into other good qualities. Their misuse, however, is what leads to harm. But of all human faculties, none of them is potentially as harmful as speech. Just as none of our faculties is potentially as beneficial as speech. So speech needs to have a lot of attention. And we need to think about the way we speak. And we need to pray to Allah, put my tongue behind my heart. Put my tongue behind my intellect. Put my tongue behind my spirit, my ruh, so that I can speak the words of a believer. The hypocrite's not like that. The hypocrite, like the fool, his or her tongue is in front of their heart, in front of their intellect, in front of their spirit. They just speak impulsively. They speak out of anger. They speak out of passion. They speak out of misinformation. They speak out of bad opinion. And then they follow up what they say by trying to think it out and justify it and take it further. But the believer is not like that. And the intelligent human being is not like that either. The gift of articulate speech, al-bayan, can potentially make us like the angels. And of course, when we combine that with all the other human qualities that we have, especially anger and passion, it can even make us higher than the angels. It sets us apart from all other creatures that we know of in the animal world. Other creatures, whales, dogs, cats, birds, they express themselves and they communicate. There's no question about that. A dog can communicate to you all sorts of things. They as far as we know, with this kind of exact communication that can carry over to the other and show them the content of knowledge. Articulation, careful speech, self-conscious, measured speech is our key to accessing oceans of meaning and infinite blessings. True or truthful, articulate speech is therefore, and not surprisingly, one of the greatest gifts and pleasures of the garden. Allah tells us that in the garden there is no laghu, there is no laghiya, there is no ta'thim, right? There is no false, empty, or meaningless speech. All the speech of the believers in the garden, and of course in the garden, all the men and women are believers. It is all speech that comes from behind the heart and behind the spirit, and therefore it is perfectly meaningful. The believer in the garden speaks words of wisdom that give him or her greater understanding of the wonders of God in creation and communicate that also to the other believers. We must train ourselves to use the gift of speech as the great Adamic and paradisial gift that it is. In this, we should walk in the shadow and follow the guidelines of the Prophet ﷺ and the way that he spoke. And then also, we learn to speak by listening carefully to and taking in the discourse of the eternal, uncreated speech of the Holy Quran. Imam Al-Ghazali says, may Allah be pleased with him, جواهر الحكم قطعا وجوامع الكلام. These are the characteristics of the speech of the Prophet. لا يعرف ما تحت آحاد كلماته صلى الله عليه وسلم من بحار المعاني إلا خواص العلماء. So Imam Al-Ghazali says, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given beyond any doubt the jewels of wisdom and concise words that bring together all knowledge. This is the gift of his speech. As he says, جواهر الحكم وجوامع الكلم. No one knows the seas of meanings that lie hidden under each of the individual words that he spoke, but the most special of the people of knowledge. So this is the way that we want to speak. And when we speak this, and to speak this way is of course training and learning and getting knowledge, but it's also paying attention to the way you speak. Making yourself conscious of the things that you and I are not usually conscious of, because we talk all the time. Often we don't even know what we're saying. We are heart creatures. We are creatures of the heart. We have to get the heart right. And by virtue of that, we are also speech creatures. Language and speech are among the most native and essential elements in the human being. And here also we can emphasize that the gift of language, the gift of speech that you have and that we all have, this is not just another skill. It's not like the skill you have that enables you to build a table, or even to make a microphone, or to learn how to farm, or to learn how to build houses and buildings, or to cook, or to sew, or to do anything else. We have human beings. We, the human beings, we have many skills. And we are the masters of learning skills. But speech is not an ordinary skill. It is very different. There's nothing arbitrary. There is nothing accidental about speech. Our speech organs and the mental capacities that enable us to speak are perfectly and minutely designed. They don't happen by chance. The most ancient of human languages are also the most incredible of them all. Did you know that? This is very, very important. The Arabic language, the language of the Blessed Quran, the language of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that an ancient language? Is it what we ancient? Did you know that? So the Arabic language in comparative Semitics is much older. What's called Afro-Asian, or they call it Hamitic Semitic. In fact, Egyptian is sort of in between. It's hard to classify it because many of the words of Pharaonic Egyptian they are like words in Arabic or in other Semitic languages. So that's also an ancient Semitic Hamitic language. Arabic would be thousands of years older than that. This is what we know on the basis of comparative Semitics. Arabic is much older than Babylonian, much older than Assyrian, much older than Iblite, even though Arabic was not written down until relatively late. How can that be? And this is another topic. We won't talk about it too much because we don't have the time. But this is especially because of the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula is remarkable. First of all, it is so large that it is virtually a continent or a subcontinent. India, the Indian subcontinent, is only a little bigger than the Arabian Peninsula. But one of the remarkable things about the Arabian Peninsula, which is situated right in the middle between Eurasia and Africa, is the fact that along the whole western coast, the Red Sea, there's no natural harbor. Jeddah was not a natural harbor. Yanbu was not a natural harbor. There's no Bombay. There is no Manila, no New York, no Philadelphia, no big open harbor in the whole coastline. That's not a coincidence. And if you go to the eastern coast of Arabia, then it's a sandy sea. That's also a coral sea, the Red Sea. Boats will be destroyed if they come near the shore, even today. And then you go to the eastern sea, which is a shallow sea and a sandy sea. And again, no natural harbors. This is why the boats of the Arabs of the East, the Arabians of the East, is a much drier desert than the Arabian desert. But Egypt has in it the gift of the Nile. There was no Nile in Arabia, no Euphrates, no Tigris, no river of any significance whatsoever. So all of these are ways that God planned the creation of the homeland of the last message, so that the people who live there, who are the ancestors of most of your ancestors would be from there, also the ancient Egyptians, they come out of the deserted quarter. The ancient pharaonic culture of Fayoum, for example, came out of the deserted quarter. This would be about 7000 BC, before pharaonic Egypt. But that's where it comes from. So there in the Arabian Peninsula, the language was preserved because no one from the outside comes in. And then جعل الله الكعبة البيت الحرام قياما للناس والشهر الحرام والهدي والقلائد. Right? So also God made with Abraham, he made the Kaaba, the sacred house, قياما للناس. He made it a support for the people, a livelihood for the people, but also the word qiyam means qiyam. It's also a leader. The people who have no king, they have no ruler, but they have the Kaaba, they have the Hajj, they have the holy months, Shahr al-Haram, which here means al-Ashhur al-Huram. It means here the months of Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, al-Muharram, and then Rajab. And in these months, we know from our ancient Islamic sources, the Arabs were very faithful in not violating the sanctity of these months. So 1/3 of the year they don't fight, they don't feud. And they said that during the sacred months, a man would encounter the person who murdered his brother, and yet he would not go near him, because it's the sacred month. You cannot shed blood in this month. And then also the sacrificial animals that you mark, and there's a special way of marking them, as you know, so that people know that this camel is being taken to Mecca to be sacrificed at the house of Allah, or this sheep or this goat. And then the qala'id, which are the garlands that you put on your animals, idkhar, and plants like that which were aromatic and they were only in Mecca and they could be taken from Mecca. That was allowed. You can't pull up plants and trees in Mecca, but the idkhar you could. And they would garland their animals with it, so that people also in other months that are not the sacred months, if they have with them animals that have been marked for the Umrah, to go to Mecca and to slaughter, they won't touch them. And when they come back with qala'id, they wouldn't touch them. So by this also, the gift of Abraham, the Kaaba, this enabled the tribes of Arabia to live together in some kind of basic harmony. You know that they had wars all the time. You know that they feuded all the time. But those feuds would have torn them apart and would have made them different languages and different people, except for the fact that they had the pilgrimage. So they're protected from the outside by the incredible geography of the Arabian Peninsula, which we could talk about all night. But then on the inside, they're protected by the Kaaba and the sacred months and the Hajj, which go back, of course, to Abraham, and in fact, even before Abraham. So the Arabic language is an ancient language. No Semitic tongue can claim to be older than it. And what is the Arabic language like? I mean, have you ever looked in Lisan al-Arab? Of course you have. And you've looked at the poetry of Jahiliyyah and the poetry of the early poets, Al-Farazdaq and others. I mean, what kind of a language is this? This language is incredibly rich. It's so rich that, as Imam Al-Shafi'i said, no one could completely take it in except for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what does this tell us then about ancient human beings? Because there is a fundamental relationship between speech and knowledge. And there is a fundamental relationship between speech and the power to think. If you have an articulate language, and what language is more articulate than the language that our blessed Prophet ﷺ spoke and his companions, even to the extent that the miracle of the Quran was the way it used that language. So then what kind of people were these? These are people who had to be capable of the highest spiritual states. And the Arabic language, as the Prophet spoke it, ﷺ, we would say on the basis of comparative linguistics, was spoken at least 10,000 years before that. So again, articulate speech is something that is not arbitrary and something that didn't just happen. And the most ancient languages are always the most perfect. This is true of Old English. This is true of Latin and Greek. It is true of Sanskrit, which is one of the oldest Indo-European languages. It is true of Old Iranian, the language of Zoroaster. Wherever you find an ancient tongue, you will be amazed by what was there. And for this reason, Arnold Toynbee, one of the great thinkers of the 20th century, he argued very cogently that the most ancient human beings were not the most primitive human beings. They were the most spiritually advanced human beings. And he also used what we call this so-called primitive religion as an indication of that. Primitive religion is the religion of what we call micro-societies. Little societies that don't have politics in them. They don't have political structures. And everything is based on kinship. And the Eskimos are an example of a micro-society. A number of Native American tribes are micro-societies. Not most of them, but some of them. And you have a lot of other people, like the people who live in the northern islands of Japan. So these are called primitive people, micro-societies. And their religions were carefully studied in the 20th century. And it was found that they're not animists at all, as a certain cultural anthropologist, Taylor, argued. He said, they're animists, they just worship spirits. He said, none of them are animists. They are all people who believe in one creator God, and they give that God beautiful names. Like the Arabs in Jahiliyyah, they may associate with that God other beings. So that doesn't mean that they're not mushrikeen, but they may associate with him heroes or ancestors and so forth, but they're not polytheists in the way that the Greeks were or the ancient Egyptians. So, we think by language, we know by language, we make other people think by language. We let other people know by language. Language, articulate speech is extremely important. If you destroy a people's language, then you destroy their access to the truth, and you destroy them as well. And this is why many times in history, conquerors destroy the languages of the people they conquer. Among the Europeans, that was a policy. You imposed the colonial language. This was especially true of the French. And it's also true of the English, but not quite in the same way. And then you let the other language just sort of be neglected. So the people can't speak it well anymore. And then you have people who really don't even have a language. They can't speak their native language very well, and maybe they never master the colonial language. So those people can be controlled. In Muslim Spain and Portugal, this is also what happened. The Muslims of Spain and Portugal, most of them spoke a Romance language. And most of them were in fact Latins who became Muslims. So they would speak Castilian, which will later be called Spanish. They spoke Aragonese, they speak Galician, they speak Catalan, and other languages. but they also spoke Arabic. They would speak Arabic dialects like you do, but they also speak Fusha like you also do. But their Fusha was very good, as probably most Muslims at that time, their Fusha was very good. And this is why when the Crusaders conquer Spain and Portugal, one of the first things they do after they gain complete control and they establish the Inquisition is that Arabic will be absolutely categorically forbidden on pain of death. Of course, one of the reasons why they do that is to Christianize the people. But another reason why they do it is to dominate them. Because having been denied their own Arabic tongue, which they knew extremely well, and which they used with the greatest perfection, they will never be able to compete with the conqueror. So language is an extremely important thing. You destroy the language of the people and you destroy the people themselves. And of course, that's a negative point of view. You have also the positive flip side of that. If you teach people language and you develop language, then you empower those people. Then you give those people liberty and the ability to do amazing things. That's why for us in Islam, the teaching of language was always fundamental. And that's why we take great concern about things like so boring that people can't even stand it. How do we do this? What do we do? You want to make this exciting, and it is exciting. It's thought. And in the Arabic language, the way that we develop grammar is just beyond words. We have sun letters and moon letters, huruf shamsiyya, huruf qamariyya. Are these poets that are doing the language or what? And then we have these incredible definitions. Al-ismu kalimatun dallat ala ma'nan fi nafsiha wa lam taqtarin bi zaman. That a nominal or a noun is a word that indicates a meaning in itself and is not connected to tense or is not connected to time. This is cosmic knowledge. It's not just about the Arabic language. This is a huge fath. And we should be able to appreciate that. You give people language and then you liberate those people. So it's very important to do that. And today in the modern world, one of the main problems that we have is the problem of language. Because in the world today, most people speak with a language that doesn't have much meaning. We live in the reign of the plastic words. Words that have 1,000 connotations and not any denotation. We use words that, of course, are good words. Progress, development, liberty, equality, and we could go on, but you will see that these words don't have clear meaning. They're plastic words. They're elastic words. And they always give positive feelings. They create certain sentiments. But they're very difficult to tie down because they don't have connotations. And that's why also in Islam, in our tradition, we're very concerned about what the word actually means. What is the definition of the word? Let's take a word, for example, like nature. Okay, that's a plastic word. We use it all the time. But what does nature mean? Is nature uncreated? Is nature a persona? Does it not have a beginning, not have an end? Is it a goddess? What is it? And in reality, the way nature is used in the West is like X in algebra, the unknown. It's the unknown. In other words, it becomes a substitute word for God himself. Because we know that this world, with the design that's in it, and the, as we say, complex, specified information that's in everything, it can't just happen. It can't be by random. And so therefore, instead of speaking about God, which would be the logical and intellectual answer, we talk about nature, and then we avoid that discussion altogether. So those are plastic words. And this is the reason why, as Muslims, we should learn to speak very carefully. What do we mean by what we say? And what do we agree on, in the words that we use? Imam Al-Ghazali says there is no limit to what your tongue can do and to where it can take you. It can bring you infinite good. You do dhikr, for example, recite the Quran. However, it can also drag you down into the mire of unspeakable abomination. So the tongue is extremely important. The tongue is a two-edged sword, a sword with two edges. The power of speech to bring infinite good is one of those edges, and that's the one you want to use. Speech enables us to say La ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. So speech enables us then to articulate our belief. And it enables us to be known as belonging to the community of the believers and being accepted in the community of the believers. That's an act of speech. We enter into Islam through speaking these words. Speech enables us to do certain types of worship, like recitation of Al-Fatiha, or prayer, or dhikr, and to declare God's oneness, to praise and glorify Allah, and to show Him thanks. Rumi, may Allah be pleased with him, he has a poem called Al-Kalimu Tayyiba, which is good words. And here he's talking about La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, and words like that. And he says, the perfume of your good words ascends to heaven. Your breaths of praise soar up, they fly up to God as a gift. From us on the earth to God's everlasting abode. Every good word plants a tree, or constructs a palace, or makes a home for you in the garden. And you'll go to the home that you made with your tongue and with your actions. This is the power of the word. God then answers your beautiful words. Ighfirli, tub alayya, subhanak. Okay, these are your beautiful words. Words of tawbah. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Okay, you say these beautiful words and God mentions you in the high assembly of the angels. If you could hear the pins of the angels write down your name that God mentioned, you would die from ecstasy. The pleasure would be so great you wouldn't be able to bear it. Much less, the pleasure of knowing that God said that. So He mentions you, and then He answers you with even better words. And He does this as a mercy and as a recompense. And then He gives you greater and greater access to beautiful words and to ways of ascent. So here, Rumi, may Allah be pleased with him, is bringing to light the miracle of how we use words between us and our Lord as a fundamental aspect of the guidance that we seek and the guidance that we receive. These words return to us, and then we use even better words, even greater perfume. Rumi, of course, is one of the best examples of that. His words are so beautiful. We ask God with more beautiful words, and all of this is so that His servant may ultimately win God's pleasure. And without ceasing, by these words that go back and forth between you and God, He draws you closer and closer. He makes you go higher and higher until finally the soul comes home and it arrives to Him. One of the things about blessed words, articulate speech, the words of the uncreated Quran, the words of the blessed Prophet, the words of the saintly men and women, is that these words are filled with meanings. And we don't even tap into all of those meanings. And these words have what we call adequacy. In other words, they give us an adequate access to God, an adequate access to the truth that reveals more and more and more. The more we think, the more we speak, the more we use them, so that ultimately they take us further and further and higher and higher. This is the nature of blessed speech. Al-Kalam al-Mubarak. And this blessed speech always contains in it, like the Quran and like the beautiful words of the Prophet, words that we understand. We know what it means to say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. And yet we never fathom what it says, what it means to say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Imam Al-Ghazali said, there is nothing that exists or that does not exist. There is nothing real or imagined. There is nothing created or uncreated. There is nothing that is creator or creation, but that speech is able to access it. Speech is able to enable you to get to it and to affirm it and ultimately to know it. This is what we call adequacy. Speech has this incredible adequacy when it is sound speech, not plastic words, but words that have blessing and they have connotation and denotation, so that we can access the truth and we can get to it. Nothing that comes under the rubric of knowledge does not also come under the rubric of speech. We mentioned before how speech and knowledge always go together. Imam Rumi, he has another poem which in English is called Ripeness is All. Ripeness, maturity is everything. He says in this poem, since you cannot bear the unveiled light, then drink in the words of the unveiled light. Drink in the words of wisdom, God's words, the words of the prophets, the words of the saints. Because in those words, the light is veiled. Okay, so the Quran is like that. The light that is in the Quran is infinite. But that light that is infinite and which we could not take in if it were unveiled, it is now veiled in the Word. And those words, maybe we can use the metaphor of a time capsule. You know, they then unveil themselves in your heart. You memorized beautiful things when you were a girl or when you were a boy. And now, as you're older, ripeness is all. Those words begin to unlock for you meanings that you never imagined. And they will unlock more and more and more. This is one of the greatest gifts of speech. By absorbing the divine, the prophetic, and the spiritual truth in the form of perfect words, the words of God, the words of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the words of the great and blessed scholars and ulama, good words, dhikr. With dhikr is thought. We gradually are brought to the point of unveiling, so that the light comes into you. We are prepared step by step, little by little, maybe from the time that we're children, when our parents or our teachers first begin to teach us to memorize blessed words. We are brought step by step, little by little, to the point of arrival and entrance, if God wills. And then ultimately, if God wills, to illumination, to contemplation, to true understanding, and to the knowledge of God, which is the greatest knowledge of all. Perhaps one of the most important gifts of speech is that it gives us access to tawbah. Atubu ilallah, astaghfirullah al-azim. What precious words. Words of salvation, words that turn the table. They change everything. And then God gives us forgiveness, even if we are unworthy of it, because He's a merciful God. The Prophet ﷺ speaks in one of the hadith of two men on the Day of Judgment that were condemned to the fire. They were evil believers, bad people. They were believers, but they were condemned to the fire. As they walked towards the fire, their heads hanging down in shame, then one of them looked back wistfully. He looks back at the place of judgment. And God asks, "Why do you look back?" And then the person said, "I had always lived in this hope that no matter how bad I am, that in the end you would forgive me and you would give me the garden." Okay, those are words. And they're words that reflect either a hadith or it's a verse in the Quran. And this is the way that many of the great scholars and awliya were. He says, the man who looked back while on his way to the fire. This is the name of the poem. He said, the guardian angels who used to walk unseen before him and behind him have now become visible and drive him to the fire like prison guards. Okay, because you have angels around you. How many? Over 100. But we don't pay attention to things like that. Okay, we forget that totally. May we never disbelieve it, because you have to believe in the angels. But on the Day of Judgment, all of these angels will be right there with you. You will then see them who were with you all of your life. So he says, the guardian angels who used to walk unseen before these people. They never paid any attention to them, but they were always there. They always recorded. They even protected. They walked before him and behind him. They've now become visible. And they drive him like prison guards to the fire. Then he looks back wistfully. Wistfully means sadly. Wistfully. His tears fall like the soft rain of autumn. Usually in the fall, the rain is drizzle. His tears drizzle down. Just a mere hope, Rumi says. What does he have but that? He's been condemned to the fire. He just has this mere hope. God, my Lord, he says, I am 100 times worse than you declared me to be at the time of my judgment. But I had in my heart this lingering hope of your loving kindness, of your lutf. I turn to your pure grace, not to my actions. So then Rumi says, God tells the angels, bring him back, for he never lost hope in me, and let him go to the garden. Allah is merciful, so maybe this person's the first to be excused from the fire. How are we doing with time? Not very well, are we? Where is the boss? Where's your father? He's delinquent. If he's delinquent, I can be too. Okay, so Imam Al-Ghazali says, then the tongue is one of God's greatest blessings. It is among the most, but the obedience that you perform by using it gracefully and beautifully is heavier than the heavens and the earth. And the disobedience that we also commit by misusing it are huge beyond words. As a rule, the tongue is the most disobedient of all our human organs. One of the reasons for this is because it is the easiest one to use. And it's the easiest to unleash. And many of us, we never get tired of talking. We talk and talk and talk. And it doesn't cost us very much to keep using the tongue. Most people, therefore, they don't pay their tongues much attention. They would in a court of law. They would, if they were in certain situations, but usually we don't ever do that. And this is what we have to wake up to. We take what we say for granted. We take what we say lightly. And therefore, the tongue is Satan's most successful instrument for destroying us and for guiding us astray. Its dangers are immense, but its potential good is also without limit. The tongue must be balanced. When we say heavy words, hurtful words, destructive words, damning words, strangely enough, they are often not heavy on the tongue. They may be very heavy on the tongue the first time they're said. And many things we can't say. If you're good people, as you are, there are many things we can't say because they're too difficult. Even if we want to say them, we can't say them. But if we do say them, then it's just a sound. And now that you've said that sound, you can repeat it. It's just breath and movement of the speaking apparatus. So therefore, we often think of the speech that we articulate as sounds that just disappear into space. But that's not the way they are in reality. Everything that we say on the tongue is an act. And it is an act that is just as meaningful as giving charity or praying or building a hospital or doing other things. The Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, لا يستقيم إيمان العبد حتى يستقيم قلبه ولا يستقيم قلبه حتى يستقيم لسانه. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the servant of God's iman will not be right, or will not be upright, or won't be straight or correct until his or her heart is right, or upright, or correct, or sound. His heart will not be right until his tongue is right. So the tongue is extremely important. Tawus, who is one of the great successors, he said, my tongue is a wild beast. My tongue is sabr. It's a wild beast. If I let it free, it will eat me alive. Al-Ghazali says that an ancient king, a wise king, even though he's a powerful king, he says, basically, my words dethrone me. He said, if I speak a word, especially a word that's not wise to say, then that word owns me. I can never forget that I said that, and I've got to always make amends for having done that. Undiplomatic words, unwise words. He said, if I speak a word, that word owns me, and I don't own it. It becomes the king, and not me. If I don't speak that word, then I own it, and it does not own me, and I'm still king. And of course, you know this from your own experiences. How many times have we said things that we wish we had never said, and for 30 or 40 or 50 years, we just wish we could go back to that occasion and just be quiet. But once you said that, it's maybe never forgotten. So when we say the word owns us, and we don't own it. Again, Imam Al-Ghazali emphasizes that when you speak, what are the criteria? Make sure that what you say is true, that it's honest. And then make sure that it doesn't hurt, it doesn't bring harm. And then third, that it brings benefit. If it's truthful and it doesn't harm, but it also doesn't benefit, then we call that fudul al-kalam. We call it excessive speech. There's no need to say it. It's better not to say it, because we want our words to be meaningful. But Imam Al-Ghazali says, but remember, even if what you say is true, even if what you say is calculated not to harm, and even if what you say is calculated to be beneficial, what is the state of your heart when you say it? Beware of hypocrisy. Beware of show. Beware of self-serving words. Beware also of things like backbiting. Okay, so when we speak also, it's like, why am I speaking? Am I showing off? Am I hypocritical in that? What is the status of my soul? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, nothing is more deserving of a long prison sentence than your tongue. Right? It's good to imprison your tongue. Don't give it freedom, at least not so much, until it learns to behave itself. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he used to put a pebble in his mouth. It's well known. And therefore, if he wants to speak, he has to take the pebble out. Why did he do that? So that it's not so easy to speak, so that he can keep silence. And how are we doing with time? Not very well.
Are you almost done, or?
I have one more page. Yeah, should we stop for questions now, or
I think it's better. Let's do it.
you think it's better? Okay, so we will do that, and let's next time we just come back to this, and we want to say, let me see. Okay, so I think next time we just come back to this point, and we'll finish this, and then we can go on to the next lesson, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And how much time do we have?
For Q&A, 30 minutes?
30 minutes. Okay, so Dara, you're the first one to raise your hand. What do you have to say?
I was just wondering if there was some sort of parallel soul, like when we're trying to control our body, we fast, we refrain from eating. What kind of soul can we do to sort of control our tongue?
Very good, very good. So what can you do? Again, as we just mentioned, what Abu Bakr did, I don't know that you want to do this. It might be very embarrassing. Maybe it could be a beautiful stone, a precious stone, but he would put a stone in his mouth so that he doesn't just speak. And learning to be silent is really important. Man samata naja. Whoever keeps silence will be safe. Inshallah, let me think about that, and maybe I can have some good advice. But again, it's very important to be conscious of this, and it's very important to make dua, and it's very important to ask Allah to help you. That put my tongue behind my heart. Enable me to do this miraculous act, which is to think before I speak and to calculate, the words that, I use. Umar ibn Abd-Allah, may Allah be pleased with him, he said that anyone who's aware that his speech is action, it's an act, it's amal, then his speech will be little. It won't be much. So this is, again, we don't usually make that connection. many of us at least, don't make that connection. We speak as if our speech were not the same thing as the actions that we do physically. The money that we give in charity or in building things, or the work we do to, the physical work we do to like clean a place or to build a place. So to be conscious of the fact that your word is an act, then this is very beneficial. It's very important to try to keep silence. And just as we fast, by not taking food and drink, then it's also possible to withhold from speaking very much and to try to make that an act of worship, although you have to be very careful because we don't want to hurt people. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why many of us speak as much as we do, because we don't want people to feel uncomfortable. And sometimes when we're silent, people interpret that wrongly. And they may think that we don't like them or that we're uncomfortable in their presence. So naturally, we want to make them feel good, and we speak. And that's a good type of speech, even though it might be frivolous. It may not be about anything of great concern. Let me think about that. That's a good question. Too good. Bismillah. Any questions? Yes.
Nothing here.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
The analogy you said about the unveiling of the words, and you made this analogy of the time capsule as if the unveiling happens gradually when the person is ready to receive that wisdom or knowledge. I understood it in a different way, that this veil is really a veil of protection, in the sense that when Allah said to Sayyidina Musa, you're not going to see me, that there's this veil. If people would actually be subjected to the direct knowledge, they would not withstand it. So that veil is really a veil of protection that maybe will never ever be unveiled. Otherwise, people will not be able to take it.
That's a very good comment. And so let's just repeat what our brother said. Is your name Hisham?
Hazm.
Hazm, yeah, how are you? So, when we talked about one of the amazing things about blessed words, like the words of the Quran or the words of the Prophet, then the expression that I used and also that Rumi uses is that the infinite light of God's knowledge and of God's ultimate reality, it is veiled in these words. It's covered over. So it doesn't destroy you. And then it's gradually unveiled in your heart so that you take in that light. So our brother Hazm is saying that this is for our protection. And I think that that's perfectly true. And that needs to be emphasized. And I think that's what Rumi is saying, and you're saying also you think that's what he's saying, right? Because we can't bear that light, just as Moses alayhi salam could not bear the tajalliyat of God, okay? And he fell faint, when God manifested himself to the mountain. Nevertheless, it's true that the believer, as he or she develops, becomes capable of receiving greater and greater light, and they become able to hold in themselves greater light. And this is in fact one of the main functions of the heart. The heart needs nourishment, and the nourishment of the heart is knowledge of the truth, of God, of the divine. But the heart also is a receptacle of light. And the heart, when it's filled with light, is the heart that is fulfilling its most basic function. As Shaykh Shadili, may Allah be pleased with him, he says that if the heart of the disbelieving, if the heart of the disobedient believer were unveiled, the one who believes but he or she does wrong things, that the light would blind the world. That even in that disobedient believer, there is great light. This is the power of belief. This is the blessing of belief. But he says, so what do you imagine the case to be with regard to the great awliya? So their hearts become filled with light. And of course, on the day of judgment, their light will run before them. And one of the great things about obedience and about living a life that is in the parameters of the halal and not in the parameters of the haram. And this pertains to the way we eat, the way we drink, the way we act, what we look at, what we listen to, the way we dress. Muslims are people of modest dress. And you see this all through the Muslim ummah. You know, even those of us who dress in a casual way, usually we don't want to reveal ourselves. And the way that a European or a lot of other people can reveal themselves, for most Muslims, even those who are not knowledgeable or obedient, that's not our nature. Al-haya is one of the most basic qualities of the Muslim believer. So we are people of modesty, but in the way we dress, for example, and the way we behave, one of the effects of that is to keep in the light. So you do what is right. You pray, you fast, you do dhikr, you do good deeds, you give in charity. And this brings you light. All acts of obedience, one of their first rewards is that God puts light in your heart. And for you to grow spiritually, you want to keep that light in your heart. You don't want to let it dissipate. You don't want there to be a hole in the bucket. Okay, so that light grows and grows. And in fact, sometimes as we progress on the spiritual path, we can even feel our hearts hurt. And there's nothing wrong with your heart. There's nothing physiological that's wrong with your heart. But it's like the heart is expanding. And this is a type of spiritual expansion. But it's like increasing in light is one of the fundamental things in the spiritual path. And your heart has to get bigger and bigger. You know, whomever God wants to guide to Islam, yashrah sadrahu lil Islam, isn't that so? That God expands their breasts. Because the truth is big. The truth is profound. And the human heart, when it is not spiritual, even though the muscular heart is still the same size, but that primal heart, the spiritual side, it is dayiq. You know, it is restricted, and it is narrow, and it can't take in the truth. It can't take in the light. So this light has to be unveiled according to our capacity to receive it. And that capacity differs from one man to another and from one woman to another. And for some, they can take immense light, especially if they are spiritually trained and spiritually mature. And then with that light, they want more and more. And the spiritual path, they talk about anwar al-wusul wa anwar al-dukhul. They talk about the lights of arrival. And what they mean by that are the divine lights that come to your heart because of the good things you do. The dhikr you do, the reciting of the Quran, the giving of charity, being kind to people, and so forth. And these lights, they come to your heart. They're called anwar al-wusul, tasilu il qalb. And these are what enable you to understand. These are what enable you to make other people understand. And then you have anwar al-dukhul, the lights of entrance, and these are the lights that come to your heart and go into your heart, and they never come out. And they say that the condition here is that your heart must be empty of every attachment except the attachment to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then that heart is his heart. And when those lights come to your heart, they go into it and they never go out. And that is when the person becomes a person of great wisdom and great knowledge and great spiritual gifts. May Allah make us like that. Ameen. Oh, thank you very much. You should put it right in front of my nose, and I forgot about it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Let me read this question. Now, we'll take you next. So, to know yourself is to know your heart. To know yourself is to know your Lord. What is the connection? Okay, so that's a very good question and a very difficult question. And, من عرف نفسه عرف ربه. This is one of the traditions in Islam, ancient traditions in Islam. The one who knows himself knows his Lord. And also, the one who doesn't know himself doesn't know his Lord. When we look at some of the most problematic Muslims of all, the ones who are very difficult to live with, very difficult to reason with, who often are capable of doing acts that are unbelievable in their violence and their lack of mercy, and nobody has to be told about that today. Unfortunately, we have too many examples. These are sicknesses of the heart that are coming out. But if you know these people, or you know some of these people, their level of self-knowledge is below zero. No self-consciousness whatsoever. And in most cases, they are egos gone wild. This is why also on the spiritual path, you have to have mentorship. And you have to have people who can enable you to understand yourself and to know yourself. And the most fundamental aspect of self-knowledge is humility. Okay? In fact, belief and good character, and belief is part of the knowledge of God. Belief and good character are like identical twins. They have so much in common, even though they're different. But good character, whether it is honesty, whether it is trustworthiness, whether it is courage, whether it is temperance, whether it is generosity, good character is always based on humility, which means that we see ourselves as less than others. We don't see ourselves as better than others. And again, one of the things we see in a lot of problematic believers, this is true in Islam, this is true in Christianity, this is true in Judaism. You always have the fanatics, the zealots, the hypocrites, who are very difficult people. It's part of the religious, it's one of the psychological problems of religiosity that has to be dealt with. But people like that, they usually have very little humility. And they usually regard themselves as better than others. Right? In fact, we have this phenomenon of takfir, which is horrible. And this is not just part of our religion, this is part of all human religions. It's one of the things that destroys them from the inside. But the takfiri always sees himself or herself as very superior to others, and therefore can condemn them, and can declare them to be something, and then either explicitly or implicitly declare himself to be the real believer. Right? So humility is very important, and humility is based in seeing other people as more worthy than ourselves. They say that a great sheikh wanted to, he was at the end of his life, and he wanted to have a successor. So he said to a person that he thought would be a good successor, I will give you this if you can bring me one person who you are better than he. Just, you find a person that you are better than that person, and then I'll give you the khilafah. So this person looked everywhere, and he looked at different believers, and he said, I couldn't find anyone. Even then he looked at people who were disbelievers, and he said, but they might become believers. And then he looked at people who were dissolute people, but he said they might change too. So he said, and I might change as well. So he just came back to the Shaykh and said, I failed. I couldn't find anyone. So he said, no, you succeeded. So you will have this. Because he didn't find, and this is honest. I mean, who are we better than? And Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, مَنْ جَعَلَ لِنَفْسِهِ وَزْنًا فَلَا وَزْنَ لَهُ وَمَنْ جَعَلَ لِنَفْسِهِ مَقَامًا فَلَا مَقَامَ لَهُ. Whoever says that he has weight, special weight, he has no weight at all. And whoever says that he has a special station, he has no station at all. Okay, this is knowing the self. This is being truthful. And it's also humility, or it's the key to humility. So you have humility, and then you have the second element, which is ithar. Ithar, which in English we might call altruism, preferring others over yourself. And altruism is, the flip side of humility. So if we are honest about ourselves, and we don't believe ourselves to be better than others, then we look up to others, no matter who they are. And we are happy to fulfill their rights. And we speak to them with dignity. And we look upon them with dignity. Okay, so this is the essence of the knowledge of the self. And this is the essence also of the knowledge of the heart. And the knowledge of God goes with that. To believe in God. Can you truly believe in God if you are Akbar? Right? No. Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greater one. As long as I feel that I am Kabir, then there's no access. And this is why also in the psychology or the spirituality of belief, the believer is humble. The believer sees himself, in this light. And did you create yourself? You have incredible gifts. You're intelligent. You can speak articulately. You can do your work. You're a professional. Or whatever you may be. You have all kinds of gifts. Did you give these gifts to yourself? Did you create these gifts for yourself? So again, my self-knowledge is never to forget that. All of us know about babies. All of us love babies. Children are all awliya. And they're great awliya, whether they are Muslim children or non-Muslim children. That's why the abuse of children is to make war against God. Children have great rights, no matter who they are. But we all know how children are when they come into this world. One of the first miracles is that the child knows how to nurse, and they may even have to be coaxed into that. Okay, but they can't focus their eyes, right? They don't look at you in the eye. Maybe they do that after a month, or maybe a little bit more. They need to do that. They have to look at your eyes. They can't coordinate their hands and legs, right? And they can't even use their intestines, to be able to digest the milk and, to have proper bowel movements. Such a basic thing. That's something you wait for, right? And when the baby begins to do that, you're happy. You're happy. So this is who we are. The Quran tells us about that. Did you forget your origin? You forget what you are made of. what you come from. You forgot that you were once a baby. You didn't know anything. Your mother gave you this life. You know, the women of your family, your fathers and others. So this is self-knowledge. And to believe in God is to be humble. And to believe in God is also, you know, we wouldn't say here, ithar, but it's something greater than that, which is ta'zim. That you have rights over me. Of course you have rights over me. You gave me existence. I can never thank you for that. Existence is a miracle. And you gave me life, and you gave me knowledge, and you gave me speech, and you gave me a family, and you gave me people to take care of me. Of course, not all people get that, but you did, right? So it's ta'zim. And that's why these two things go together, which is good character, which is always rooted in self-knowledge. It's always rooted in self-consciousness. And it will bring self-consciousness. And then also ithar, the, you know, holding the other in esteem and being happy to give them their rights and happy, you know, to treat them with dignity. And the opposite is also true. Bad character is rooted in arrogance and pride. Or it could be also lack of concern. Like a lot of people today. A lot of people in all times, that they may not be especially arrogant, they may not be especially proud, but all they care about is themselves. All they care about is self-indulgence. Today, we have these incredible technological tools, you know, and we have to be very careful that we don't become excessively self-indulgent. How many times have you been in a group of people today, let's say in a waiting room, you know, and are they talking with each other? What are they doing? They all have their smartphones, right? And they're just sitting there like this, right? For hours. I mean, really, I've watched people that it's like he never changes. He just sits here like this, like he's petrified, just watching his phone, moving it like this. Okay, so that's not necessarily arrogant, it's not necessarily tyrannical, but again, it's totally oblivious to the world around him. So this becomes an obstruction to good character. And and then, you know, looking down on others. So not only do I look up to myself, but the rights of other people don't count. We can lie, we can cheat, we can manipulate, we can steal. You know, no big deal. I get it, and that's what counts. So bad character and disbelief, they go together. And bad character and hypocrisy are always rooted in lack of self-knowledge, lack of self-consciousness. And then the disbeliever, they can't really worship Allah because they're worshiping themselves. Ana akbar, right? I am the one who's important. And then they can't do ta'zim, just as they can't do ithar. It's just not in their psychology. And if you look at the Quran, when Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about the disbelief of the disbelievers among Quraysh or among the Jews or others, He's always telling us about their character. That they are people who lie, they break their covenants, they take the rights of orphans and widows. They don't, you know, so it tells us all these things about them, right? And therefore it's also showing us that there is a fundamental connection between their bad character and between for all people capable of the greatest sacrifices and gifts. And that good character, that's what also opened the door for them to believe. So when we look at the world today, and we're concerned about things like bringing Islam to life and spreading the da'wah, one thing that's very important to look at is the character of the people. If we find a people who are good people, who are not arrogant, and who respect others, then those are people to take very seriously. Because if this message is brought to them properly and packaged beautifully, you know, when you give a person a beautiful gift, you don't give it to them in a garbage bag. You give it to them in a beautiful wrapper. And likewise, when we present Islam to the world, it should be in a beautiful wrapper. That's not so easy to do today because there's so many garbage bags filled with garbage. They call themselves Islam or are called Islam. But, you know, we need to do that. And if you have people of good character, they may believe. In the Americas, you know, one of the peoples that I believe have the best character of all are the Canadians. And I love that country. I love my own country, the United States. But often I feel that the Canadians have better character than we have. And of course, on the individual level, that's probably, you know, there are differences all over. But it's interesting, you know, that recently in Canada, a mosque was burned down in the Northern Territories. And the Canadian Armed Forces rebuilt the mosque twice as big as it was before. And then they also said, we will volunteer to see that this mosque is protected. That's good character. And there are many instances of that. There are, of course, terrible things happening in Europe, and those are complex things. We don't want to oversimplify. A lot of the Muslims in Europe are treated like dirt, and they've been treated like dirt for years, especially in France. And in Belgium, it's not much better. Some countries are better than others. But, you know, so, you know, we have to look at the whole situation. But nevertheless, you know, there are bad things that happen. But I was told that in one Scottish city, don't remember which one it was, but that they decided that they would put Muhammad, the name Muhammad, on their city buses, and then after it put Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, I was told that they did this, and Dundee, I think it was the city of Dundee. So, may Allah bless them. And there are good people, and especially in difficult times like these, there are times when good people often stand up, and they can often be seen. So the good people, these are the ones that you should focus on. And inshallah, you know, they are very likely to come in because they stand on the threshold of belief. Whereas people of bad character, and this should be a warning to us, because even if we're Muslims and we pray and we fast and we do everything else, but we have bad character, we are arrogant, we look down on others, then we stand on the threshold of the fire. And it's not difficult to go over that. I remember once I was in a Muslim country and they had rains, and I was going to the mosque, and a particular man who had a really rich car, he sped up to the mosque, and there were puddles of water, and he splashed all the people on the sidewalk. Many of them people who were going to the mosque to pray. And then he parked, and he got out of the car, and he was really, it's like Pharaoh, you know, and he walked into the mosque and goes into the front row, and he prays. And you know, Allah accept his prayer, Allah be merciful to him. But again, it's like your character. I mean, what about these people you splashed? You know, what does this say about you? And this means also that you have to be careful, because it may be actually that your iman is not as strong as you think it is. It also may be an ego trip. Do we have another paper? Or?
Yeah, next to your copy.
Oh, this is another one? Okay.
Dr.
And will that, yes.
I think that paper and Mustafa's question
Okay.
should be the final.
All right, so let's take Mustafa's question.
We can keep it brief.
Okay, and I'll try to. Right,
So, in our everyday lives, we have to deal with people, and sometimes we have to have diplomacy. But I sometimes feel that from this diplomacy, I perceive myself as a hypocrite. So, where's the borderline between both?
Yeah. دارهم ما دمت في دارهم, right? So, flattery and hypocrisy is one thing, but mudara is another one. And they're not the same. And we say, darihim ma dumta fi darihim. That, how would we put that in English? But it means deal with them wisely as long as you're in their abode. So it's not hypocrisy, but this is one of the things that we should be able to talk about in the days ahead. That, you know, the way, things like ta'reed, roundabout speech, we don't want to lie, you know, but also sometimes, you know, you have to be very careful about the way that you speak with people. So, we don't want to be hypocrites, and in fact, just as Imam Al-Ghazali says, if you're speaking the truth explicitly, and you're being very careful that what you say is not harmful, and you're also trying to be very careful that it's beneficial, but are you hypocritical in saying that? Because it could be that it's just a show. So these are things that always we have to look for the right balance. And then we'll end with this question. So, okay, well, this person is asking about Umar Al-Faruq, radiallahu anhu, and the fact that he was unlike Abu Bakr, and he was very expressive, and he had other qualities, and of course we also know that in Jahiliyyah, he is the one who decided that he would stop the whole thing, that if this prophet is going to divide Quraysh, then I will just get rid of him. And Umar knew that he would be killed, because that you will not do anything to the prophet, but that Bani Hashim will kill you. But Umar is like, that's okay. If this is what's needed to save Quraysh, then I will do that. And of course you all know the story, so the beautiful story. Because the thing is that Umar was truthful, and he was sincere, and he believed what he had heard. And so then on the way to kill the prophet, then he's told that by a man, an ally from Bani Zuhra, that, you know, why don't you take care of your own family first? What about your sister? His sister's name was Fatima. Fatima was a common name in Quraysh. And so then he goes to her house, and as he approaches, he hears Taha, Surah Taha being recited. And then he goes in, and of course, he has a fight with her husband, and he, as one narration says, he hits his sister by mistake. He didn't mean to do that, and she begins to bleed. And he is a good man, and he loves his sister, so that's too much. That affects him. And then he has a change of heart, and he says, let me hear the words that were being recited. This is amazing. And then they tell him that you have to make ghusl, you're not clean, and he does that. And then he listens to these words, which he must not have listened to before, and his heart melts. And immediately with his sword on, that he had put on to kill the beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes to the house of Al-Arqam by Safa and Marwa, and he comes to the door, and there is Hamza. They say that Umar is outside, you know, with his sword. And Hamza said that if he came in peace, then we accept him. And if he came to do harm, then we'll kill him with his own sword, which Hamza was certainly capable of doing. And then Umar embraces the Prophet embraces him, and this becomes one of the first major victories of Islam. So Umar is a person, you know, without peer. And again, he is not on the same level as Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is the best of them all, without question. And Umar always recognized that. But he was a powerful person. Yet in him also, you see all the elements of good character. Even though he did things in Jahiliyyah, that reflected Jahiliyyah. but he is able to change all of that and to follow the truth. And he certainly was one of the most intelligent human beings who ever lived. Radiallahu anhu. And his brilliance as a Khalifa is without parallel. So Umar, he has this strength in him and this toughness, but also, as the Prophet knew, his heart was soft. And the best people are the ones who are strong outwardly, but their hearts are soft. And the worst people are the ones who are soft outwardly, but their hearts are hard. And this is why also when Umar sees his sister harmed by his own action, then it affects him, because he has a soft heart. He has a good heart. So, he is one of the most perfect of all human beings. And we believe in Islam that on the day of judgment, the prophets will not be judged, the messengers will not be judged, the angels will not be judged, and there are many great believers like Abu Bakr that will not be judged. Wouldn't be fair, because their books of good deeds are so immense, they would tip the scales, no matter who else were in the balance. But Umar will be the first to be judged, and his book of good deeds will fill the earth with light. So we ask Allah to give us good character, give us good speech. And again, when you look at people like Umar ibn al-Khattab, his power of speech is beyond words. His ability, and this is why the Prophet will call him Al-Faruq, the one who distinguishes between truth and falsehood. And this is also, in my belief, one of the miracles of the Prophet, which I think many Muslims may not be aware of. Because Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, it was written that he would be the conqueror of Jerusalem, of Palestine and Greater Syria. And he is the one to whom the keys of the Holy Sepulchre would be turned over. And our Arabic word, al-Faruq, which is a relatively unusual word in Arabic, it's pure Arabic, but we don't use that word all the time. That word also exists in Aramaic and in Hebrew. And in Aramaic it is paruqa, paruqa. They make the fa a pa. And what does that word mean? Paruqa in Aramaic, which was the language of the Christians of Jerusalem, it means Savior. See, so they would refer to Jesus Christ as Mesiha Paruqa, Messiah and Savior. And it's really like Messiah and Faruq, because the Faruq is the one who can be the Savior. But this is amazing, because when Umar comes to Jerusalem, then, as you know, he won't come with a bodyguard, he won't come with a legion, he will come by himself from Medina all the way to Greater Syria, where the armies are, and he has with him a slave and himself. The slave is serving him. And he will, one camel, not two. He could have taken two. He takes one, and one of them will ride and the other will walk. The other will then ride and the other one will walk. And when they come to Jerusalem, the one who's riding the camel is the slave. It was his turn. And that's why when the patriarch or the metropolitan comes out to greet him, he greets the slave. That this is the Khalifa. And then he's told that, no, it's this one down here walking. And again, what was the effect of this on those people? That they know these are people of God. And this man, his name is Paruqa, the Savior. So these words must have affected the Christian in ways that you and I cannot even imagine. And then also they tell him to pray. What is it, in the Church of the Resurrection? And he says, no, because if I do that, then Muslims will take it as a mosque. And we want this to remain as a church for you. These are historical, monuments, that are at the basis of our history. And may Allah make us worthy of that, and you are worthy of that. And may Allah give us the means to do the kind of work, the kind of teaching, the kind of writing, the kind of positive social engagement that can bring Islam back to life in these times, بإذن الله تعالى. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. آمين آمين آمين. I hope that we'll see you every night. I know you're very busy. The idea is to try to begin at 7 and then end at 8:30. You see that tonight I'm a failure, right? But we wanted to try to do that so that you can get home on time, because I know that many of you live all the way across town, and I know that you have work to do and jobs to go to, and so we want to make it as easy as possible for you to do this difficult thing, which is to give us the honor, of your coming here to be with us. And inshallah, it's a great joy and an honor for me to be with you and to be back in this wonderful country with this wonderful people. And you have treasures in this land. You have great treasures, and you have great traditions, and you have scholars and knowledge. And we ask Allah that this can be made accessible to the whole world. Very, very important. To bring the truth